Hello Midnights. Up next, the Smurl Family Haunting. Let us know where you are listening from and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you. The Smurl Family Haunting stands as one of the most widely publicized and controversial claims of demonic infestation in modern American history. Beginning in the mid-1970s and escalating dramatically through the 1980s, Jack and Janet Smurl and their 4 daughters reported a terrifying litany of paranormal phenomena in their West Pittston, Pennsylvania home, drawing the attention of media, religious figures, scientific skeptics, and the infamous paranormal investigators, Ed and Lorraine Warren. To fully grasp the complexities and controversies surrounding this case, listeners benefit from understanding that it escalated far beyond a typical haunting, evolving into a claimed demonic infestation, which significantly raises the stakes and the theological implications. This particular designation places the Smurl case squarely within a long-standing cultural and religious tradition, reaching back through centuries of folklore and ecclesiastical history, of believing in active malevolent spiritual forces, which continues to fascinate and terrify across societies. The Smurls' ordeal allegedly began subtly after they moved into their duplex on Chase Street in August 1973. Initially, disturbances were minor, almost dismissible, prompting mild annoyance rather than fear. These early signs included unexplained dark, greasy stains that would appear mysteriously on walls and ceilings. These stains, often a dark, tar-like substance, were said to defy attempts to clean them, with the residue sometimes reappearing hours after being scrubbed or new stains emerging immediately next to cleaned areas, suggesting an active rather than passive source. They also contended with recurring, inexplicable leaks, particularly in the basement, where water would appear without any discernible plumbing issue or source of ingress from outside, pooling inexplicably in the middle of dry floors or seeping through seemingly solid concrete. New fixtures, especially in the bathrooms and kitchen, would soon be marred by odd, almost deliberate-looking scratches, described as deep gouges or deliberate marks etched into porcelain or metal. Beyond these tangible nuisances, a growing sense of unease began to permeate the home, often characterized by subtle, palpable changes in air pressure that made the ears pop or created a heavy atmosphere, faint, unidentifiable noises from empty rooms that sounded like shuffling or distant whispers, and the fleeting sensation of being watched by an unseen presence. However, over the years, the intensity of the phenomena purportedly escalated into something far more sinister, painting a picture of calculated cruelty designed to break spirits and minds. The constant, unpredictable nature of the alleged demonic terror meant there was no respite for the Smurl family. Every creak, every shadow, every shift in temperature could be a precursor to a new horror. The assertion that the Smurl home was afflicted by a demonic infestation, a theological term far more severe than a mere haunting, lies at the heart of the case's controversy. In Christian demonology, infestation refers to a demon's oppressive influence on a place, objects, or animals, often involving physical phenomena and sensory disturbances. This is distinct from oppression, where a demon torments a person externally with afflictions like depression or illness, or the most severe possession, where a demon controls a person's body and will. For the Smurls and their proponents, the escalating and intensely personal nature of the events pointed unequivocally to a malevolent, non-human intelligence with a specific agenda of spiritual and psychological destruction. Skeptics, conversely, argued that such claims lacked empirical support, were resistant to scientific inquiry, and likely stemmed from complex psychological, social, or environmental factors, often exacerbated by a strong pre-existing belief system where ambiguous stimuli could be interpreted through the lens of fear and religious conviction, for example, confirmation bias, pareidolia. The core of the demonic infestation claim rested on several alleged characteristics that, to the Smurls and the Warrens, distinguished their torment from more common paranormal experiences. These included calculated malevolence and personal targeting, where unlike benign or residual hauntings often seen as imprints of past events with less interactive malevolence, the Smurl phenomena allegedly demonstrated a distinct, intelligent malice. This was evidenced by physical and sexual assaults, the specific targeting of family members including children and pets, and the purported following of the family even after they moved. This pointed to a conscious entity intent on torment, seeking not merely to disturb but to destroy their family and their faith by undermining their sense of safety and spiritual well-being, sometimes allegedly through attempts to sow discord or despair. Another key characteristic was blasphemous and anti-religious actions, as the alleged escalation of activity during prayers and exorcism rites, the violent throwing of religious items like crucifixes, rosaries, and Bibles, and reported foul, blasphemous language whispered by unseen voices were interpreted as direct assaults against the family's faith in the divine. This language was reportedly specific and deeply offensive, sometimes cursing God, mocking sacred figures, or issuing explicit threats of damnation. Finally, the nature of the entities was highlighted by Ed and Lorraine Warren's specific identification of a complex spiritual hierarchy at work within the Smurl home. They identified 4 distinct entities, each with a perceived role and level of malevolence. Foremost was a primary, powerful demon, described as the orchestrator of the most severe torments. This dominant entity was purportedly responsible for the graphic physical and sexual assaults endured by Jack and Janet, its immense power manifest in its apparent resistance to repeated exorcism attempts. While the Warrens did not attribute a specific name to this demon in the public narrative, its characteristics aligned with traditional descriptions of high-ranking, malevolent entities. Alongside this primary demon, the Warrens claimed there were 2 lesser demons or evil spirits. These entities were believed to be subordinate, responsible for much of the general poltergeist activity, the moving objects, the auditory disturbances like scratching and banging, and the pervasive foul odors. Their presence served to amplify the chaos and fear within the home, creating a constant state of anxiety and reinforcing the primary demon's control. The 4th entity identified was a lost human soul, often described as a disoriented or suffering spirit. This human spirit was not seen as inherently evil, but rather as being tormented and manipulated by the more powerful demonic forces. Lorraine Warren, through her clairvoyant abilities, reportedly perceived this soul as an elderly, confused female spirit, possibly a former resident of the property, trapped and exploited by the demonic presences to heighten the fear and confusion. The Warrens differentiated these entities through a combination of Lorraine's reported psychic perceptions and their analysis of the phenomana's varying patterns and intensity. The combined, coordinated efforts of these 4 beings, from the Smurls' perspective, represented a targeted, multifaceted assault aimed at breaking the family's will and ultimately driving them from their home, or worse. However, these very claims became the source of intense controversy. Critics, primarily from the scientific and skeptical communities, pointed to the absolute lack of empirical verification. Despite claims of objects moving violently, physical assaults, and visual apparitions, no independently verified photographs, video recordings, or scientific data such as precise, measurable temperature fluctuations or unusual energy readings were ever presented. The evidence typically consisted of anecdotal accounts, and while Ed Warren claimed to have audio recordings, these were never publicly scrutinized or verified by independent experts. A powerful counter-argument also arose from the fact that subsequent residents of the Smurl duplex reported no paranormal activity whatsoever after the family moved out. Furthermore, psychological explanations and suggestibility were frequently cited. The intense stress and sleep deprivation experienced by the family could have led to hallucinations, misinterpretations, or heightened suggestibility, especially when combined with strong religious beliefs. Some proposed mass hysteria or shared delusion, where anxieties were unconsciously reinforced, and the involvement of the Warrens also drew criticism, with skeptics suggesting they may have inadvertently or intentionally guided the family's interpretations towards demonic infestation. The potential for hoax or exaggeration was also raised, particularly given the extensive media attention, book deal, and TV movie, leading to suspicions of sensationalism for commercial gain. Lastly, medical or environmental factors were considered, such as Jack Smurl's history of meningitis or potential mundane issues within the old house, though these were not rigorously investigated as primary causes. The controversy surrounding the Smurl family's claims of demonic infestation thus boils down to a fundamental clash between deeply held personal belief and the demands of empirical evidence. For the Smurls, it was a terrifying, undeniable reality of spiritual warfare. For skeptics, it remains a compelling case study in the human mind's capacity to interpret the inexplicable, often through the lens of profound fear and conviction. As the initial minor disturbances failed to deter the family, the alleged entity or entities seemed to escalate their activity with calculated precision. The family claimed to experience pervasive auditory phenomena that went far beyond typical house noises, including loud, inexplicable banging and thudding against walls and floors, violent scratching sounds as if something were tearing through surfaces, and the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps pacing through unoccupied rooms. These were punctuated by chilling, guttural pig grunts, unearthly screams that seemed to pierce the quiet of the night, not resembling any known human or animal sound, disembodied moans of agony filled with a quality of profound despair, and the eerie, rhythmic creak of a rocking chair rocking vigorously in an empty room. Janet Smurl particularly recounted hearing the sound of a crying baby in the house, a deeply unsettling phenomenon that played on maternal instincts, appearing randomly even when no infant was present, and causing immense emotional distress by triggering feelings of helplessness and unresolved sorrow. Beyond sounds, they reported extensive physical manifestations, where objects moved on their own, often with force and apparent intent. This wasn't merely subtle displacement. Kitchen chairs would reportedly slide across the floor with a screech, and a heavy wooden crucifix was allegedly ripped from the wall and tossed across the room with a violent clatter, seemingly aimed at a family member or a sacred space. Lights would switch on and off without human touch, sometimes flickering rapidly, almost as if tauntingly, while doors would open and close seemingly of their own accord, often slamming shut with unexpected, deafening force. A pervasive, foul odor akin to rotten meat, sulfur, or acrid smoke permeated the air, often appearing and dissipating without a discernible source, intensifying the feeling of a malevolent presence. This smell was not constant, but would frequently accompany peak activity, making the air thick with dread. The terror extended to direct assaults that targeted both the living and even pets. The family dog was reportedly thrown against a wall with significant force, one of the daughters was pushed downstairs by an unseen hand, and both Jack and Janet Smurl claimed to have been physically and sexually assaulted by unseen entities. Jack reported being repeatedly attacked by an unseen force, at times describing it as a succubus-like entity, with these assaults being explicitly violent and sexual, leaving him feeling drained, violated, and deeply traumatized. Janet also claimed to have been physically assaulted in her bed by an unseen force, feeling hands grab and squeeze her, and at one point, even alleged to have been levitated and slammed against the ceiling with enough force to cause bruising. One of their twins reportedly fell gravely ill with an inexplicable infection, which the family, in their growing desperation, attributed to the entity's malevolent influence. While medical records from that time are not publicly detailed to confirm the inexplicable nature from a professional standpoint, the family perceived the illness as beyond normal medical explanation. Visually, accounts included terrifying sightings of dark, amorphous masses coalescing in corners, shadowy figures darting through hallways, unexplainable glowing forms appearing in the home, and in some instances, a grotesque pig-human monster thing described as a fleeting, shadowy silhouette with bestial features, was even said to have charged directly at Jack Smurl, instilling profound, primal terror. The Smurls also frequently described significant and sudden drops in temperature, often preceding a major manifestation, where rooms would instantly become frigid, plunging tens of degrees within seconds, accompanied by a heavy, oppressive feeling that made breathing difficult. Some family members spoke of feeling brushed or pushed by invisible forces, creating a constant state of hypervigilance and an inability to relax in their own home, leading to chronic anxiety and a pervasive sense of dread. The Smurls' ordeal was a slow burn that erupted into an inferno, with the alleged entities seeming to follow certain patterns and escalations, suggesting a malevolent intelligence at work. The activity often intensified significantly during attempts at prayer, blessings, or particularly during the exorcism rites performed by Father Robert McKenna. This was interpreted by the family and the Warrens as the demon reacting with fury to spiritual opposition, a direct challenge to divine intervention. Crosses would be thrown, religious items defaced, and the physical attacks would reportedly become more violent during these moments, as if the entity was fighting back against the sacred. While disturbances occurred throughout the day, the most terrifying and aggressive phenomena, the physical and sexual assaults, the loudest noises, and the most prominent visual manifestations, were predominantly reported during the night, particularly in the privacy of the bedrooms. This tactic maximized the psychological impact, depriving the family of restful sleep and eroding their sense of security. The Smurls claim that the entity followed them outside the house, even to their subsequent residence and during a camping trip, was a crucial and terrifying aspect of their narrative, suggesting that the entity was not simply tied to the location of the duplex but was personally attached to the family, making escape seemingly impossible. The constant terror also led to a severe disruption of their daily lives. Schoolwork became difficult for the children, their concentration shattered by fear. Attending to normal household chores was often interrupted by sudden manifestations, turning mundane tasks into anxious endeavors. The pervasive sense of dread created an atmosphere of profound anxiety, making simple tasks feel monumental. Sleep became a luxury, with family members often opting to stay awake or sleep together for a sense of safety, further exacerbating their mental and emotional exhaustion. Before the Warrens' involvement, the Smurls themselves desperately tried to document their experiences. They meticulously kept logs of phenomena, noting times, dates, and types of occurrences. They reportedly attempted to use simple audio recorders to capture the disembodied voices, grunts, and bangs that plagued their home, hoping to provide concrete proof to skeptical outsiders, particularly clergy who initially offered little more than blessings. Overwhelmed and desperate, the devout Catholic family eventually sought help from various sources, finding little lasting relief. Local priests performed blessings, but the Smurls claimed these attempts were ineffective, often seeming to provoke the entities further rather than banish them. It was in 1986, after years of unrelenting torment and feeling increasingly isolated by the lack of understanding from conventional authorities, that the Smurl family's story exploded into national headlines when they contacted Ed and Lorraine Warren. The Warrens, self-proclaimed demonologists and paranormal investigators, were already well-known figures who had gained significant public attention through high-profile cases like the Amityville Horror, the Perron family haunting depicted in the Conjuring films, and their work with the Annabelle doll. While revered by many believers as experts in the supernatural, they are highly controversial figures among skeptics and some religious scholars who question their methods, the verifiable evidence for their claims, and their commercialization of these cases. Upon their involvement, the Warrens conducted an extensive investigation, according to their own accounts. They spent considerable time at the Smurl home, interviewing each family member in detail, observing the environment, and employing their signature methods. Ed Warren, as a Catholic layman and demonologist, focused on documented signs of demonic activity and attempted to provoke reactions from the alleged entities, often using a camera and tape recorder in hopes of capturing evidence. While Ed claimed to have made audio recordings during his investigations, these specific recordings from the Smurl case were never publicly released or authenticated by independent experts. Lorraine Warren, functioning as a clairvoyant and medium, claimed to perceive the spiritual presences directly and communicate with them, often describing specific details of the entities she sensed, such as their appearance, names, or malevolent intentions. It was during these investigations that Ed famously reported feeling a significant temperature drop, witnessing a dark mass moving through rooms, and even finding a chilling message "Get out" etched into condensation on a bathroom mirror. Lorraine recounted feeling overwhelming evil and, in one instance, seeing scratch marks appear on Jack Smurl's leg in her presence, an event she attributed to the malevolent forces, though independent witnesses to the precise moment of scratching were not detailed. Their help to the family involved several key actions, rooted in their spiritual and investigative approach. The Warrens' immediate and perhaps most crucial contribution was to diagnosis and validation of the Smurls' terrifying experiences. They listened to the family's harrowing accounts without skepticism, affirming their belief that they were indeed dealing with malevolent, non-human entities rather than simply a haunting, psychological issues, or fabrications. This validation provided immense psychological relief to the Smurls, who had felt isolated and disbelieved. Based on their investigations and Lorraine's psychic impressions, they asserted that the house was afflicted by not one, but four distinct entities, a primary, powerful, and malevolent demonic entity responsible for the physical and sexual assaults, two lesser demons or evil spirits, believed to be subsidiary entities responsible for much of the general poltergeist activity, and a lost soul, described as a disoriented human spirit being manipulated or tormented by the more powerful demonic forces. This classification provided the family with a clear, albeit terrifying, framework for understanding their torment. They also provided spiritual guidance and protection, advising the Smurls on specific spiritual measures they could take, including consistent and fervent prayer, the strategic placement and use of religious artifacts such as crucifixes, holy water, and blessed metals, and maintaining a strong Catholic faith, believing these could serve as a spiritual bulwark against the forces of evil. Crucially, the Warrens also played a pivotal role in facilitating exorcism, advocating for the need for a formal rite and leveraging their connections to help connect the Smurls with Father Robert McKenna. This was a critical step for the family, who felt abandoned by their local church. The local diocese had been hesitant to authorize exorcisms due to the church's strict criteria for such rites, which typically require clear, objective signs of demonic possession rather than just paranormal activity, and a desire to avoid sensationalism. Father McKenna, a traditionalist Catholic priest, known for his conservative theological stance, believed that demonic activity was more prevalent and required more direct intervention than acknowledged by some mainstream church authorities, making him willing to undertake such rites when he felt warranted. The Warrens believed Father McKenna's involvement was the direct path to liberation, even if his rites initially seemed to enrage the entities further. Finally, the Warrens engaged in public advocacy and media strategy, encouraging the family to go public with their ordeal, believing that exposing the evil might weaken it and garner broader support or understanding. This decision, however, drew controversy, with critics accusing the family and the Warrens of sensationalizing the events for public attention and potential commercial gain, and undermining a sober investigation of the claims. The Warrens consistently differentiated between a poltergeist and a demonic infestation, asserting that the Smurl case contained all the hallmarks of true demonic oppression. For the Smurls, the Warrens' involvement offered not just a diagnosis, but also a lifeline, providing validation and a spiritual framework for fighting an enemy they felt was otherwise insurmountable. The Warrens' involvement led to several attempted exorcisms by a Vatican-mandated priest, Father Robert McKenna. However, according to the Smurls and the Warrens, these sacred rites only seemed to enrage the demonic entity, making the activity more severe. During these rites, phenomena were reported to intensify, with objects reportedly flying, temperatures plummeting further, and the entity's presence becoming almost palpable, as if directly challenging the priest's authority. This apparent escalation, rather than alleviation, of the terror was interpreted by the Smurls and the Warrens as definitive proof that they were dealing with a powerful, conscious, and highly resistant demonic entity. In a move that garnered significant national attention and raised eyebrows across legal and religious communities, the Smurl family, in 1988, filed a lawsuit against the alleged demonic entities tormenting them. This civil suit, initiated in Luzerne County Court, named John Doe entities as defendants, essentially attempting to bring the supernatural realm into the jurisdiction of earthly law. The lawsuit sought damages for emotional distress, physical harm, and property damage. While legally complex and ultimately dismissed due to the impossibility of serving a subpoena on a non-physical entity, the act itself was a powerful testament to the Smurls' profound belief in the reality of their torment. The legal dismissal occurred primarily because the court found no legal standing to sue an unnamed, non-physical entity, highlighting the immense challenge of seeking legal recourse against alleged supernatural forces within a conventional justice system. The Smurl Family Haunting, a narrative steeped in terror and controversy, has, over the decades, drawn sharp commentary from both fervent believers and resolute skeptics, highlighting the deep divisions in understanding what truly transpired. Critics primarily leveled arguments concerning the lack of objective, verifiable evidence. Despite claims of objects moving violently, physical assaults, and visual apparitions, no independently verified photographs, video recordings, or scientific data were ever presented. The evidence typically consisted of anecdotal accounts, and while Ed Warren claimed to have audio recordings, these were never publicly scrutinized or verified. A powerful counter-argument also arose from the fact that subsequent residents of the Smurl duplex reported no paranormal activity whatsoever after the family moved out in 1988, which for skeptics suggested the phenomena were not inherent to the property. Furthermore, psychological explanations and suggestibility were frequently cited. The intense stress and sleep deprivation experienced by the family could have led to hallucinations, misinterpretations, or heightened suggestibility, especially when combined with strong religious beliefs. Some proposed mass hysteria or shared delusion, where anxieties were unconsciously reinforced, and the involvement of the Warrens also drew criticism, with critics suggesting they may have inadvertently or intentionally guided the family's interpretations towards demonic infestation. The potential for hoax or exaggeration was also raised, particularly given the extensive media attention, book deal, and TV movie, leading to suspicions of sensationalism for commercial gain. Lastly, medical or environmental factors were considered, such as Jack Smurl's history of meningitis or potential mundane issues within the old house, though these were not rigorously investigated as primary causes. Responding to these criticisms requires acknowledging their validity from a scientific standpoint while also representing the profound impact and unwavering conviction of the Smurl family. Critics are entirely correct in pointing out the lack of objective, verifiable evidence that would satisfy scientific methodology. No investigator could produce irrefutable data that could be replicated or studied under controlled conditions. This absence means that, from a purely scientific perspective, the claims remain unproven. However, to simply dismiss the Smurl family's account as mass hysteria or hoax risks minimizing the profound psychological and emotional distress they reported over more than a decade. For the family, the events were undeniably real and terrifying, impacting their daily lives and sense of safety to an extreme degree. Their desperation, including attempting to sue unseen entities in court, speaks to a deeply held conviction that extended beyond seeking attention. While pre-existing beliefs might offer a framework, the sheer intensity and alleged malevolent nature of the phenomena suggests something more for those who experienced it, a perceived deliberate torment that transcends simple misinterpretation. The core of the debate often hinges on whether such phenomena are inherently beyond the scope of current scientific measurement, meaning the lack of traditional evidence is not necessarily proof of non-existence, but rather a reflection of the limitations of the tools being used. The Smurl case serves as a poignant reminder of the chasm between subjective human experience and objective scientific proof, where personal experiences, particularly under extreme duress, often defy conventional categorization. The media frenzy surrounding the Smurl case was intense. While the family and the Warrens stood by their claims, the story also faced significant scrutiny. Local and then national news outlets were captivated by the Smurls' harrowing claims, framing the narrative as a real-life horror story that resonated deeply with a public fascinated by the supernatural, particularly after films like The Exorcist. This framing, while increasing awareness, also contributed to the sensationalism and the difficulty in discerning fact from dramatization. The media coverage also highlighted the stark divide between the believers and the skeptics, creating a compelling public debate and turning the Smurl home into a microcosm of the larger societal struggle between faith, science, and the unknown. The Smurl family's harrowing experience in West Pittston left an indelible mark on their lives, continuing to shape their paths long after they left the infamous duplex in 1988, relocating to Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. Their decision to go public, driven by a desperate search for help, thrust them into a spotlight that would follow them for decades. From the perspective of the Smurls and the Warrens, the haunting was solved or brought to an end through a combination of unwavering faith and persistent spiritual intervention. The series of exorcisms performed by Father Robert McKenna, though initially met with increased demonic fury, were believed to have progressively weakened the entity's hold. The family reported a gradual, intermittent weakening of the entity's presence and a reduction in the severity and frequency of phenomena in between the ceremonies. The family's steadfast adherence to prayer and their deep religious conviction were also considered crucial in their spiritual battle, providing them with the resilience to endure. Ultimately, the reported cessation of the most violent and intrusive phenomena occurred after the Smurls left the Chase Street duplex and moved to a new home. While this move provided a geographical separation from the original alleged epicenter of the activity, the Smurls maintained that the entity initially followed them, only to eventually dissipate its influence after continued spiritual warfare and prayers. They perceived this dissipation as a gradual reduction in phenomena until they ceased altogether, a hard-won peace the family attributed solely to their spiritual efforts. Jack and Janet Smurl remained unshakable in their conviction regarding the demonic nature of their ordeal. They committed themselves to sharing their story, appearing on various television programs like Larry King Live and Entertainment Tonight, and contributing to the book The Haunted. They viewed their public appearances not as a quest for fame or financial gain, as they maintained they received no money from the book or movie, but as a moral imperative to warn and potentially aid others experiencing similar inexplicable torments. Jack Smurl passed away in June 2017 at the age of 75. While specific details on Janet Smurl's passing are less readily available in the immediate context, she also passed away some years after the main events. Their steadfast belief, despite intense public scrutiny and skepticism, was a defining characteristic of their later lives. The four Smurl daughters, Dawn, Heather, Shannon, and Karen, who endured the alleged terror from childhood into adolescence, largely retreated from the intense public eye, seeking to live more private lives. However, the experience undeniably impacted their individual trajectories. Karen Smurl, one of the twins, has publicly spoken about her experiences and has reportedly embraced an interest in the paranormal as an adult, occasionally working as a paranormal investigator for various local groups, seeking to help others who claim to face similar inexplicable phenomena and provide the validation her family once sought. She has expressed her father's satisfaction that she became a voice out there for people who need help, reflecting the family's desire for understanding and assistance for others facing similar claims. Information about the specific adult lives and occupations of Dawn, Heather, and Shannon is not widely detailed in public records, but it is generally understood that they, too, navigated the complex aftermath of their extraordinary childhood. From a skeptical viewpoint, the case was never solved in a scientific sense, as the existence of the phenomena themselves was never independently verified. The cessation of activity after the Smurls moved out is seen by skeptics as compelling evidence that the phenomena were either subjective psychological, stress-induced, or attention-driven to the family themselves or tied to some uninvestigated environmental factor within the original house that ceased to be an issue once they left. Crucially, subsequent occupants of the house on Chase Street have consistently reported no paranormal activity. This lack of continued phenomena in the original location is often cited by skeptics as the strongest argument against a static, location-bound demonic infestation. Despite the house itself settling into a quiet existence, the memory of the Smurl haunting remains a significant part of West Pittston's local lore and continues to draw curiosity. The story, popularized by the book and the 1991 TV movie The Haunted, and now slated to be re-explored in The Conjuring, Last Rites from 2025, ensures that the Smurl family's terrifying account remains a compelling touchstone in discussions about the paranormal, decades after their ordeal began, a testament to the enduring human fascination with unexplained phenomena and the eternal debate between faith, fear, and scientific inquiry. The story of the Smurl family haunting has appeared in two primary movies. The Haunted, a movie from 1991, this was a made-for-television movie. It was directly based on the Smurls' book, which was also titled The Haunted, One Family's Nightmare. The film starred Sally Kirkland as Janet Smurl and Jeffrey DeMunn as Jack Smurl, and prominently featured the involvement of Ed and Lorraine Warren in the narrative. The Conjuring, Last Rites, the upcoming fourth main installment in the Conjuring franchise, is reportedly based on the Smurl haunting. It is set to be released on September 5, 2025, and will feature Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga reprising their roles as Ed and Lorraine Warren.